Normally when I do these types,
Sorry.
it's being recorded. Normally when I do these types of things or when I run workshops, it takes 3, 4 hours really to run through the entire corporate sponsorships or everything I have to say about it anyway. This will be fairly condensed. I'm likely going to talk really fast. One, because I talk fast anyway, but two, because I have a lot of content I want to get to. So I'm going to ask that you hold your questions until till the end, and then anything that I didn't cover here or you want to get into more detail with, we can go from there. So I'll just share my screen here. Everybody can see that, I assume. So I'll jump in. So first, I'll chat just a little bit about how I ended up here today and what my background is. I've been working in corporate partnerships for about the past 15 years. Started working. I'm in Edmonton, so I started working for the Edmonton Oilers. Went back to school, actually got an MBA, and then I got doing all the corporate partnerships with Northlands for about 5 years. So we're doing K-Days, which, the poor man's Stampede, the Canadian Finals Rodeo, Canadian Derby, a lot of different programs around the Expo Center. And then I started event partnerships about 5 years ago, which obviously was horrible timing because COVID hit about 2 months after we started here. But after we came out of the pandemic and events came back, we've been quite busy ever since. So, over the last 3 years, we've brokered over $2 million in partnerships for our clients. Effectively, different events and facilities will hire us to go out and bring in the corporate partners for them. And then we also do a lot of consulting work as well, where we help smaller, normally nonprofit organizations really just figure out what it is they need to do to go out there and find corporate partners. So I run workshops with them and do some coaching calls. This presentation here will be a very, very, very condensed version of that. But as I'll get to at the end, there is a workshop that I'll be doing in about a month through Sport Calgary as well. So I'll jump in. I always entitle this presentation Successes in the Margins. And the reason I call it that is because really what this is about is improving your processes so you can find that extra 10 to 15% marginal growth every year. There's not like a magic phrase or a silver bullet or anything like that I'm going to go through so that, you call WestJet and they go, oh, okay, you said the thing I wanted you to say, now I have a check and I'll make it out to you and you'll put our logo up and away we go. As much as I would like this business to work that way, and maybe it did one day, that's just not the reality of it today. It's about doing things the right way over and over and over again, and then you start to build things over time. The idea is over time you build a real portfolio of stable corporate partners who are going to be with you for the long term, not somebody who's going to come and maybe sponsor one little thing for a few $1,000s and that's the end of it. But having long lasting multi-term partnerships where you have that revenue coming in every year, then you can scale and build around knowing that revenue coming in. It mitigates any risk that goes along with that because, again, that revenue is guaranteed and you have the stable partners to help you get into it. So I'm going to start with some basic definitions, which I think are important so that you can speak the language to the people that you're going after. So what is sponsorship? Brands are sponsoring anything that you're doing because they want to borrow the equity that your brand or your property has. So, if you're doing a lot of good work in the community or whatever it is, and people have a really high perception of what it is your property does, brands want to be able to tap into that. They want to be able to be associated with that. They're effectively borrowing that equity from you. They're also going to want to leverage the relationship with your customers or your clients or whoever it is that's coming out to your events. You have a relationship with your fans, with your users, whatever it is. They want to leverage that relationship. So there's a lot of different ways that they would go about doing that. But at its core, that's what they're trying to accomplish. I also want to chat a bit about how sponsorship and advertising are not the same thing. Advertising can be a part of sponsorships, but it's not just slapping a logo on something and walking away. So a lot of times when I'm working with a new organization and we're looking at what their inventory is that they can sell, they'll say something like, oh, well, we have this score clock here, or we have this gym wall over here, and we think we can put a logo up there. That's great, and that's not worth nothing. But what that is just slapping a logo and it's advertisement. And if these companies were really just looking for a billboard like that, they'd call Pattison Advertisements and they'd just buy a billboard. Sponsorship is multifaceted. There's going to be multi activations going on. I should actually pause there because I use the word activation a lot. For anyone who doesn't know, if I say an activation, that's the brand bringing like their brand to life. So they're running a contest. They have a on-site like activation booth. They have speaking opportunities. We'll get into it a bit more, but when I say activate, I mean it's more than just slapping a logo. they're out there, they're actually doing something at your event. Sponsorship isn't philanthropy either. And this is something that I run into a fair bit with my clients as well, because especially with some of the nonprofits and foundations I work, what their approach is often is they'll go to a brand and go, hey, we're doing all this great work in the community. Can you give us some money so that we can continue to do this work and you can say that you're supporting us? It's not to say that there isn't value in that statement or value in going after a philanthropic donation. But one, that's just not what I do, and that's not what I'm here to talk about. But two, it's important to understand that even if the company you're going after for a sponsorship does have a philanthropic arm, that's going to come out of a different budget. It's likely going to be a different decision maker. The way that they measure the return on investment is going to be markedly different. It's a completely different approach to going after. So it's not to say there isn't value in philanthropic initiatives. It's just not what I'm here to talk about, and it's not sponsorship. And you don't want to confuse the two, because again, the person that's in charge of sponsoring things probably isn't the person that's in charge of donations. It's going to be a completely different approach. Ultimately, companies are sponsoring because they want to drive a business outcome. Now, what that outcome is will depend on what the company is itself. But a good, just succinct way to say it, companies sponsor to leverage a relationship with a property to drive some sort of an outcome. Driving traffic back to their locations, improving their brand, gathering data, whatever it is, but it's an outcome that they're looking to accomplish out of this. It's not a donation, it's a business decision that they're making. And I think that's very key to keep in mind when you're doing your sponsor pursuits, because you always need to be thinking about what the brand is trying to get out of this. So I'll chat a bit about presenting sponsorships versus sort of your secondary, tertiary, and other sponsor levels that you're going to come in with. A brand that is presenting an event, a presenting partner, or a naming rights partner, it differentiates because the event is now going to be presented by that company. It's different than just sponsoring or activating on it. They are now going to be an integral part of the overall event. Their name, their logo is going to be completely incorporated into the event's logo, into the facility logo, into the way the whole event is put on. They're going to have multiple brand activations that are going to be going on throughout. It's not just going to be, in the image here, this is a deal I did. State of the City was presented by Epcor. Epcor had a big part of the presentation of this event. It wasn't just us putting it on and then the word Epcor was there. With a presenting partnership, I think it's important to hit that 3 to 5 year term on a contract. If it's shorter than that, if it's a 1 year, it's really hard to build a lot of brand symmetry so that people really start to associate that okay, this company and this property are linked. It normally takes a couple of years to get through that. And also you kind of might want to tweak things year after year. On the other side, any more than 5 years, you run into a lot of risk of what the market is going to do. So a deal that might look great right now, by 2030 may look terrible. The economy changes, market conditions change, the popularity of the sport or the activity or whatever it is going to change. I mean, you really just don't know what it's going to look like beyond a 5 year horizon. So the sweet spot I find is about a 3 to 5 year term with any presenting partner. Sponsorships, do a 1 year contract, at least as a starting point, and then maybe you look to grow it into a 3 year term. I always love multi-year deals because then you're not wasting time renegotiating and you know that money's coming in year after year. But sometimes you do start at the 1 year, but with a presenting or a naming right, minimum 3 years. Otherwise, it's just really not worth it. A note on exclusivity too, because this comes up a lot. And this is just me personally, there's other schools of thought, but my own thought is that any presenting partner or naming right partner should be granted exclusivity. If it's the ATB Classic, TD sponsoring it as a secondary sponsor is going to look weird. It's probably going to annoy ATB. Likely you talk to them about it anyway, but you don't want to kind of create that conflict. Anything below a presenting level, in my mind, you can have as many from the same category as you want. ATB and TD can both sponsor the same event, provided that one isn't truly owning the event with a presenting partnership. I'm hoping that all makes sense there. That's also a great leverage opportunity. So if you have an ATB that's coming in at the secondary level and they want an exclusivity, it's a great opportunity to go, yes, we can grant you exclusivity, but you need to pay a premium for it. But we need to bump you up a level. any company that I've dealt with understands that you're not necessarily going to, the deal's not going to go away because of over the exclusivity clause. Um, Anytime I've run into that, again, below the presenting level, no one really expects exclusivity, but if they want it, they can pay for it. Okay, so we're preparing for sponsor outreach. So I'd encourage everybody here to go through. I'll obviously walk you through this, but this is something you want to do before you ever pick up the phone or start emailing different brands about coming out to it. You need to take a step back and take a really hard look at what it is your property is. So who are your demographics? Who's coming out to it? You want to have actual data on this whenever possible. It's one thing to tell a sponsor, it's families that come out. But if you can say like, well, 70% of our audience comes from families. If you can gather postal codes, you can get a lot of information out of that. But you need to know who your people are and who the brands are going to reach through a partnership with you. And then you start to think about it. You go, okay, well, what products or services are these people going to buy now, and which ones will they likely buy in the next 5 years? And when I do consulting work, a lot of times what'll happen is I'll be working with, let's say a hockey organization, and they'll go, well, our audience is going to need skates, or they're going to need, skating lessons, or they're going to need stick tape or things like that. That's all true, but think of it a bit broader than that. So if it's families, it's they're going to buy a house likely at some point, or they're going to need to furnish a house, or they're going to need insurance, or they're going to need a car, or they're going to need tires, or whatever it is. There's a long list of things that these groups are purchasing or will likely to be purchased, and you need to really think about what the spending habits of them are going to be. This again is why the demographic information is so key. From there, create a list of which companies are going to offer these products or services that your demographic is going to need. And that's where we'll start to develop a prospect list that you want to hit, or you want to create before you really even start working your way through it. A note on that prospect list, it should include your own current vendors. So if you're a facility and a cleaning company is coming in every night to clean and they're getting a lot of business from you, they should be on your outreach for sponsor. If you have food and beverage sales at your event or your facility, the providers of those should be sponsoring as well. They have a marketing budget for that. I've done deals with Cisco, with Coke, with Be Clean or Scandinavian. They do have money for that. And if you're giving them 50, 100, millions of dollars worth of business, whatever the number is, asking them for a small percentage of that back as a sponsorship, most of them are going to say yes just because it's good business. I'd also encourage you, once you have that prospect list complete, is to vet it internally with your own staff. There might be a conflict you don't know about. There might be some history with an organization that you're not 100% sure about. Somebody else might have already reached out to them, and you don't want to, get in the way of what they're already doing. But ensure that everybody is aligned, or any decision makers or any stakeholders are aligned with the people that you're going to go out with. You don't want to get into a situation where you're 80% of the way to getting a sponsorship done, and then somebody vetoes it. Somebody has bad blood, or they're worried about the brand perception, or they don't think they're the right company, or whatever it is, because one, it's a huge waste of your time, and two, it really burns a bridge because you've wasted their time too, and you're telling them that, oh no, sorry, we can't actually work with your brand for X reason. Get in front of that problem and have a current list of prospects that are just like, yes, we know these are vetted, they're ready to go, we don't have to worry about the perception of that. Some water here. The next thing you want to do is create a full inventory list of everything that you have to offer. And as I mentioned before, this goes beyond signage on site. I've listed some examples here. You probably have more than what is listed here, but it's things like, branding on site, but digital branding, social media promotions, opportunity cross markets. So what I mean is you're promoting Subway is a sponsor, but then you have Subway promote your event too, and then you can tap into their reach. Things like PA announcement. Speaking announcements is often huge, or speaking opportunities. A representative of a brand often wants to be there, even if they're just talking for 2 minutes, just to say, hey, Subway is the greatest company in the world, and we promote these guys, and this is why it's important to us. But often these guys want to have that opportunity to speak to your guests. Hosting opportunities and tickets are really huge as well. If you have any sort of ability to create, if you're having an event, especially like a bigger one, anything you can create around a VIP experience is huge. Companies like to do that. They like to come out and have some drinks with their clients. They like to bring out their staff and show them a good time. They like to be present at the events that they're partnering with. And it doesn't have to be anything like huge. Like you don't have to necessarily like rent tents or anything, but just creating a space that feels intimate, that feels exclusive, and it makes them feel like, hey, these guys are giving us the love. It just becomes really easy to build that relationship that way when you have those hosting opportunities. Beyond that, in-person activations, like I said, setting up a booth or whatever it is on site, running contests. You can do this digitally too, which I'm sure you're all aware of, but if you have TV screens or anything like that, rotating logos through, rotating QR codes through is a really good one too, because then they can run contesting, and they're also able to collect the data of your people coming through. So a lot of organizations I work with, especially like communications companies, things like that, they're doing it to collect data. They want email addresses. They want to be able to connect directly after the event ends with your clients that are your customers that are coming through. Distribution of marketing materials. I'm sure you've all been to events with a million swag pieces that have been given out. When it comes to swag, the one cautious thing is you never, and it's difficult because a brand will have their own idea of what to do, but ensure that whatever you're handing out is useful. It isn't some sort of a burden that's just going to end up in the garbage, possibly at your event. I've been drowned in terrible pens and toques and things like that, and it just creates a bad activation. Now, I mean, if the brand is showing up and they have a bunch of stuff to hand out, maybe you just kind of got to live with it. But if there's an opportunity to work with them on what it is that they're actually handing out, I'd encourage you to do that. Because again, like handing someone something and then they go, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this the rest of the night, becomes a real burden on them. And it just makes for a bad brand impression. So try to stay away from that when possible, or at least vet it whenever possible. But that is a tricky thing to navigate for sure. And then finally, community investment programs. A lot of these guys, they want to be seen as doing good in the community. They just want a program that's bigger than that. So, if you're doing things with youth, or you're lowering barriers to participate in your program, or you want a company to subsidize part of the cost of say lower income kids coming out, or something along those lines, those are really great ones too. Companies like to do those things. It makes them look good in the community, but I wouldn't pitch just that. The community program might be the centerpiece of a partnership, but you're going to have other branding and activation elements because they have their business goals that they're going to need to hit as well. And the community investment programs, well, great, don't necessarily drive traffic or anything for that again. So if you're doing community investment, those things are awesome, but it just can't be everything that's a part of that property, because the value ultimately just isn't there for the brands if you do it just that way. So finally, we'll get into, you have your inventory list, you have your prospect list, but you need to know what to sell your inventory for. In the workshops I do, we can get much more into this. It's tough to get into it in the 2 minutes I can spend on this slide here. There are agencies, myself included, and other ones that do this type of work for you. The few things I'll say is valuation can be tricky, because a lot of times you'll see companies and they'll have a certain metric, for every impression it's worth 2 cents, and we get 10,000 metrics, so it's now worth X. That's a good starting point, but a few notes with that. One, different assets are going to be worth different things to different companies. So as an example, if you broker, say, a $10,000 sponsorship with a car dealership, they only need to sell one car to make a profit on that, and they're very happy. Whereas if you sell a $10,000 sponsorship to Subway, I mean, they got to sell a lot of subs before they were getting that ROI. So what that number means to different companies and what the return or the process of getting a return is going to be very different. And it's something you just need to keep in mind when you're having these conversations. Also understand that at the end of the day, things are worth what the market's willing to pay for it. I mean, it's basic economics. So just because your metric says that, yes, this is worth $10,000, doesn't mean sponsors were necessarily going to get to that level. Or it might mean that it's actually worth more than that level. A good way to go about it is to look at what comparable organizations are selling their sponsorships for that are similar, and ensure that you're more or less in line with them, because any company that you go after is going to receive 5 phone calls a day from people looking to get sponsorship dollars from them. They know what other people are charging. these marketing managers, they're smart. They know what the market values are for these. And if you're offering or trying to sell something for $10,000 and a comparable product exists for $5,000, it becomes a very easy decision for them for which they're going to go into. So it's a long way of saying that, you know, there's a lot of ways to go about it and it takes a lot of homework to get into it. It's something I can chat about a bit more. And again, there's agencies that do nothing but this that can help you out. But you do want to make sure that you have a list of your asking price anyway for every piece of inventory that you have. That way, when you're building a proposal and you're saying, okay, they're going to get these 6 pieces of inventory in the proposal, you know exactly what to value it as. And then if a sponsor goes back to you and goes, well, we don't need all 6 of those benefits. We just need maybe 4 of them. You then know how much to reduce the ask by. You have a guide for it. So it's important to at least have those numbers as a guide. The last thing I'll say on that, when you're putting together your costs or your ask for your sponsor assets, is to be aware of the cost it's going to cost you to fulfill it. So I've seen deals where we got $10,000 from somebody. Well, not we, because I wouldn't do this, but other people got, say, $10,000 from a company, but it cost them $9,000 to fulfill the sponsorship. Once they paid for signage and then they paid for the hosting opportunities and the food and beverage, all of a sudden a $10,000 deal doesn't look very good, even though at first glance you go, hey, we brought in 10K. A note with that too is to make sure you're accounting for your own time. So if it's a low level sponsorship and it's taking you hours and hours and hours of back and forth, or one of your colleagues hours and hours and hours of back and forth with them, I mean, you have to pay that person to do that. So that's a hard cost that's associated with this sponsorship as well. So just be aware of that. Sponsorships should have a very healthy margin. 70% is sort of like the least amount that I would ever go with. So if it's a $10,000 sponsorship, it should not cost more than $3,000 to fulfill it. And even 3,000 is high. I think in my career, I've maybe hit the 30% mark like 2 or 3 times. Normally it's about 10 to 15. This should be a very high margin product. So ensure that you're getting the margin necessary. Otherwise, you know, why are we even doing this? The final thing I'll say on preparing for the sponsor outreach is ensure that all the stakeholders in your property are aligned with this. Because when you bring on another brand, you're giving up full control. And you need to make a decision of whether you're okay with that. And there's not a right or wrong answer. It's just something that you need to decide. Because now you have partners that are going to have a say in the way the program is delivered. And you're no longer going to have full control of what your brand looks like in the marketplace. So what I mean by that is, an event manager, an operations manager, somebody working for you has an idea of what they do and don't want when it comes to sponsorships. But then the guy actually writing the check comes in and says, well, actually, you know, we'd like our logo here and we'd like it to be kind of big. And also we want to have this display at this part of the event. And it's not necessarily what your events or operation people had thought of. And they can get pretty territorial about it. And I understand, like, that's their baby. They've spent a lot of time in it. And then somebody like me comes along and goes, you got to change it because I have some money for you. It can be a bit of source of conflict. So I'd really make sure you get in front of that before you ever really start going into market. And also just understanding from a basic risk point of view that that brand is now going to be associated with your property, especially at the presenting or naming rights level. So if you have an event and it's now the ATB, you know, Classic, and the CEO of ATB suddenly gets in a lot of trouble for something, that's going to have an impact on your brand, even though it's not your fault at all. Most contracts will have some sort of clause for termination based on that in it, but it's a risk that is out there. It typically doesn't happen, but it's just something you need to be aware of. And again, making sure all your staff are aligned. So that includes things like they know exactly everything that the sponsor is supposed to receive. They might be asked the question in real time, especially with live events. You know, like something could go wrong and you're not 10 feet away from it to try to fix it. You want all of your staff to be able to make sure that they know what the sponsor is getting and being able to deliver it for you if need be. You don't want to create a situation where your internal staff don't know what's going on, or they're a little bitter about it, or they don't like the idea of sponsorships or anything, you know, something along those lines, because that makes for a bad experience, and bad experiences are what make sponsors not renew. So again, make sure all this work is done internally before you even start to go into market. Okay, so I spent about the past 20, 25 minutes here chatting about your property and getting you ready. But sponsorship's really not about you. As much as you might think it is, and as much as most people think that it is, sponsorship is about the brand that you're going after. And I can tell you right now, every company that you're going to go after is different. You might think ATB, TD, BMO, they're all basically the same and they're all trying to accomplish the same thing, but they're really not. This is where the work really comes in this industry. So before you start reaching out, research their company a bit. What is the state of their industry? Are they doing really well right now, or are they pinching pennies? If it's an oil company, how's the price of oil doing? Are they going to have excess revenue? Real estate's doing great right now. So, I mean, realtors probably have some extra money to go along with, whereas other companies may not. Understand that before you ever go out to them. Understand what the organization structure is. Who's making these decisions? Is it a marketing manager? Is it a marketing director? Is it a community investment specialist? Is it the owner because it's a smaller company? Is it a VP? Who are you going after? Who are you trying to reach in the first place? What is their fiscal year, and what is their turnaround time or approval process on these types of things? That's going to completely dictate your negotiations and how long this is all going to take. If their fiscal year starts in 2 months, you're great. We can go after next year's budget now. If you're 10 months away from their next fiscal year and their budget is already set, you might be able to get money, but you really need to start thinking about, okay, what does this look like in 10 months? And what does the approval look like? If you have an event in 2 or 3 months, I mean, one, that's really not enough time. But if you can get a quick turnaround, like you're talking to a mom and pop and their owner can just give you a quick yes or no, then maybe it's worth your time going after. If it's a big bank or something like that, I can tell you they're going to take months and months and months to make a decision. That's just the way of it because it has to go up and down the chain. And typically a big company only makes these decisions every quarter. So it's just going to take a while, which isn't a bad thing. It just needs to dictate or guide the way that you're reaching out and who you're reaching out to and when you're reaching out to them. And then doing and it'll also obviously guide the time frame behind the negotiations as you kind of move this down the path. Ultimately, though, what this really boils down to is anytime you go to a brand, there's 2 questions that you need to be able to answer. What problems can a partnership with you solve? And what targets will this partnership help them reach? At the end of the day, that's why they're doing this. Can you do something for them? Not what can they do for you, it's what can you do for them, and that's the approach that you need to go through with it. Now every company's going to have a different answer to these questions, but you need to know what the answer is. That's going to guide everything else. Okay, now the fun part. You actually have to go out and sell this type of thing. So there's a few approaches that I always take that over time I've had a lot of success with. The first I'll say is you need to continually network. This isn't just picking up the phone all the time. You need to be in places. You need to meet people, go to conferences, go to hosting events, go to VIPs, go to after-hour mixers, whatever it is, meet people. Have your 30-second story about what it is you do ready and just talk to people. And when I say that, it doesn't have to be like schmoozy or schemy. You don't have to like go in and be pitching people like as soon as you meet them, but it's just, hi, I'm Adam. I work with event partnerships. We represent, X company and Y company. That's what we do. What do you do? But you build these relationships and you start to understand, what these companies are looking to do and who makes the decisions. So a quick example, I was at a conference about 3-4 years ago and met the president of Arc'teryx, a guy named Ken Hawkins. We didn't like spend a whole lot of time together, but we met, we shook hands, probably had a coffee or something like that, connected on LinkedIn, exchanged emails. The whole thing was maybe like 5 to 10 minutes. But we got to know each other a little bit. 3 years later, as in like a few weeks ago, I'm now working to bring on sponsors for a property that Arc'teryx would align very well with. So it was easy for me just to go and send Kent an email and go, hey, remember we met before, I'm Adam, I'm working on this event. I think it would be perfect for Arc'teryx for these specific reasons. Is it you I talk to or who do I talk to? Within an hour, he got back to me and going, oh, you know what? I know exactly who you need to speak to. It's not me because I have people below me making these decisions, but please connect with these guys. He made the introduction. We've connected. They have a proposal in front of them. We're 90% of the way, I'd say, to being signed off for a pretty significant amount of money, which I'm fairly excited about. But the point is, it was all just because I went to a conference 3 years ago. So get out there. You might not see the initial return, but over time, if the more people you meet, the easier it is to just connect with those people and not ask them for money, but start to broker these conversations. Beyond that, you can call them directly. You can email them directly. LinkedIn searches, Google searches. It's actually pretty easy to figure out who a decision maker is when you know where to look. Even just typing things like ATB Marketing Manager into Google will likely yield a result. Same with LinkedIn. It's also pretty easy to even guess what an email address is if you don't know already. It's likely going to be some variation of first initial last name at atb.com or something along those lines. It is actually easier than you maybe think. If you're then making a cold call, or you just haven't been able to find their information online, or you can't find them directly, you need to just make a cold call, which nobody really likes making, but God knows I've made enough in my day, and sometimes you just have to. My approach, honestly, it's fairly straightforward. If you call a company and just the receptionist or somebody like that picks up, you just say, "Hi, my name's Adam. I'm calling on behalf of Sport Calgary. Reason for my call, I was looking to reach out to talk to somebody about perhaps partnering with our events and like a community investment or marketing point of view, but I'm not really sure who I'm best to speak to. Do you think you could point me in the right direction?" Just be honest and come up with something like that. I've said some variation of that line hundreds of times. I'd say 80% of the time, they tell me exactly who I need to speak with. They'll direct me straight to them on a call. Sometimes I get the voicemail. Sometimes I talk to them directly, but I now have the name. And that's really the big, the first step forward. You don't have to have a big schmoozy spiel. This isn't like, one of those telemarketers calling you. You just, "Hey, I'm Adam. This is why I'm calling you." Most of the time, you'll get exactly who you need to connect with. Like I kind of alluded to, once you get in touch with them, really what you're looking to do is just set up a call or a meeting for later. So it's, "This is who I am. This is why I'm calling. This is why I'm calling you specifically." You don't want to come across like this is a boilerplate copy and paste kind of pitch that you've given to 10,000 other companies. That's going to be a turnoff for them right away. It's, "This is why what we have to offer fits with your brand." Just be a few sentences on that, but make sure that that's in there so that they understand that this is for them specifically. And then you look to set up a call or a meeting. Whenever possible, I always like to take somebody out for lunch or coffee. I'm a firm believer that buying somebody a $25 chicken sandwich at Cactus Club or something like that is one of the best investments you can make. They have to eat lunch anyway. You got an hour of your time, and they love you because you bought them lunch. But sometimes you're in Calgary, you're looking to connect with somebody in Toronto. That's not necessarily possible. Set up a virtual call if you can, because there's just more communication done that way. But again, whenever possible, do it in person. And then a final note on that is really try to maintain a CRM, a database, a customer relationship management software, and keep all of your contacts in there. There's a ton of free ones online. You likely already have a few of these internally. Just make sure you're using them. Anytime you meet somebody with a new company, just put their information in there. Anytime you reach out to them, make sure that's tracked as well. If you don't do that, or you're even just doing it on like an Excel spreadsheet, like I did when I was first starting out, it just becomes such a monster to try and maintain. You really just want that kept in a very succinct and easy place to track everything. And that data is huge, because you're going to have other campaigns maybe a year from now. Just because someone said no that today doesn't mean a year from now you couldn't go back to them. But you need their contact information to live somewhere. Personally, I use HubSpot. I find that's pretty good. They have a free version and a paid for version, but there's 1,000 other ones as well. But just use something. Don't just rely on spreadsheets or your own notebooks or anything like that. And really, really make the commitment that every time you talk to somebody, you are entering that data into the CRM. That's going to be huge for you down the line as your database grows. I really can't stress that enough. Just really, really make sure that you're using a CRM for these efforts. So now we have our meeting with your decision maker, and this is kind of the big one. So when you're in this meeting, you want to ask them a lot of questions, and you want to listen more than you talk. It is very tempting, and God knows I've fallen into this too. So you're in the meeting and you want to talk about your organization and the work that you do and why your property is the greatest thing, and tell them stories about all the successes you've had and the kids that you're helping, or whatever it is. That's all great. And if they ask you questions about it, feel free to answer it. But understand again that this meeting is about them, because sponsorships are about them. So these are some of the questions that I always ask. What is your strategy? Some companies don't have one, but a lot will. And they'll say, well, these are the types of things that we sponsor, and this is how they like to do it. What are your pillars of investment? What that'll be is, we support the arts, or we support sports, or we don't support corporate events, or whatever it is. But often they have this mandated. A lot of the bigger companies will have this right on their website, so you can find out before you even go into this meeting. But ask these questions so you just understand. What is your target market? Who are you looking to connect with? What story are you trying to sell? Do you host clients? How do you measure sponsorship return on investment? That's a big one. Some companies have a specific metric, and everything just boils down to when they're evaluating a sponsorship or evaluating a potential sponsorship is, can we make this metric go up or go down? It might be, do we collect more data? It might be, do we have more QR codes? But understand that going in. I'll tell a really quick story on this because it was a mistake I made a few years ago. I was working with FC Edmonton, who unfortunately don't exist anymore, but we had brought on a company to do a sponsor one of the event or one of the games. So for that game, they just owned the entire event. They had multiple activations and announcements. The branding was everywhere. It was a beautiful day in early September. The weather was perfect. We had a great crowd. I was pretty pumped about it. And then after the event, I went up, or after the game, I went up and said, okay, well, how'd it go? Were you happy with everything? And she goes, it wasn't great. It wasn't quite what we were looking for. And when I asked her why, she said that the way that they measure success was the amount of QR code scans they got for this contest they were running. The more scans, the happier they were. And that was really the only metric that mattered to them. And unfortunately, they had a QR code in front of their activation booth, but it was really like low on the ground and it wasn't at eye level and people couldn't really see it. Now, some of the blame went on them for just not setting it up properly. But if I had asked them that question ahead of time and I understood what that metric was, there's things I could have done. I could have got PA announcements inviting people to scan. I could have got that QR code on our jumbo screen. I could have done lots of different things to try to encourage that. But I made the mistake of not asking. And so I didn't put together a partnership that was based on that metric. And then therefore the partnership failed, even though by all optic levels, it looked like we had done a very good job. So again, it's just a really important question to understand. Not every company is going to have a specific metric, but even asking them in question itself, it showcases that you're a professional and that you understand, what it is they're looking to accomplish. How are we doing on time? 12:40. Okay, we're pushing through here. Okay, so you've had your meeting. You have all the information you need. Now what you need to do is create a proposal. In the workshops I do, I go through this in much, much more detail and can help you, create ones of your own. But for here, what I'll just say is the first couple pages of it are going to be what your property is, your vision, your values, your goals, and then demographic information whenever possible, and all the demographic information you have. There's no such thing as giving them too much data. The more information you can hand them, the better it is. And if this is a new event in particular, or one that you're looking to scale up, including your marketing plan is huge, because if you don't have historical data, you're at least showing them that we have a plan to attract the demographics that we're looking to attract. Otherwise, you're just kind of saying, well, we think 1,000 people will come. But if you've never done this before, you don't really know. So finding some way to prove to the brand that you at least are likely to bring out those people is really key to that. After that section, you're going to get into how what you are specifically proposing to the brand will align with what they're trying to accomplish. So what I would do is go, like, you told us this was, the metric you're looking, you want more QR code scans. This is how we're going to bring you more QR code scans. You like to host clients. These are the client hosting opportunities we have for you. You need brand awareness. This is how we're going to rate brand awareness, whatever it is. But you should already have this information. And then everything that they told you, you're basically regurgitating back onto the proposal, and then showing them that, one, you listened to what they were saying, and two, you have a plan for them to achieve those results. That this isn't just, we'll put your logo up a bunch of times, but this is a partnership designed to deliver the results they're looking to deliver. The next couple of pages, you get into the detailed proposal. This is everything that we will give to you. This is the investment fee, and this is the term, if it's 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. And then obviously at the end, you'll have a conclusion information, how to contact you, that type of thing. The one thing it's really important to keep in mind with these proposals, they're not really for the person that you're giving it to. Whoever you're giving it to likely has a boss that is going to sign off on a yes or no. They might recommend it, but somebody else is probably giving the final approval. So what you're really doing is you're giving the person you're talking to the tools they need to sell this sponsorship internally. So the more data you can give them, the more, the better case that you can give them, the way that you can use this proposal document to look very professional and straightforward and separate yourself from the other hundreds of people that are going after them for sponsorship dollars is going to be very key. Remember that whoever you're speaking to is just a person working a job. And much like you, they want to look good at their job. They want to get promoted. They want their boss to be happy with them. They want to feel good about the decision that they're making or the recommendation that they're making. So give them the tools to help to do that. One, they'll love you because you're really easy to work with. But two, you're going to get more yeses as a result. Again, these organizations are hit up for sponsors all the time. A couple of years ago, I was meeting with TELUS's national office, and I asked them about these online application forms they get, and just asked them how many they come in, and they said they get about 1,500 a year. So you break that down by say 200 business days, and we're talking 7 or 8 every day, which is about every hour somebody is asking TELUS for money. There is no way for them to comb through all of that in detail and make sure that every proposal is or isn't what they want. What they're looking for are keywords for professionalism and to work with companies that they can trust with their brand, which again is why these proposals need to be very professional and very detail oriented. They want to be able to go, okay, we can give them the TELUS logo and they're not going to make us look terrible. There needs to be that element of trust. And this proposal is the best way to help you go about doing that. So again, it's very key. I'd spend a lot of time creating these proposal templates. It's something I work with my clients on because I think it really, really matters. And you really, really want to put your best foot forward. Another little just quick anecdote that I'll tell. I was talking with, I won't say the name, but it's like a major, major, major national brand that everyone on this call will know and has probably shopped at in the last few weeks. They moved away from sponsoring NSOs, national sport organizations, Alpine Canada, Skate Canada, etc. And the reason being is they found that whenever they were working with them, they didn't have the business professionalism or the sponsorship professionalism to deliver what they said they would deliver on. So what happened is this brand would come in, things wouldn't be set up the way that they wanted to be, and they ended up having to do a lot of the work themselves in addition to paying the cash sponsorship fee. You need to create turnkey operations so companies can come in and feel really good about how this is all going to operate. And your proposal where you go through and say, this is how we're going to deliver is a huge, huge way to go about doing that. I see some questions coming in here. I'm just going to push through the last few slides and then hopefully we'll have a bit of time left for some Q&A. All right. So final note here, it's a quick question. This is a cool picture of a cool event I did in London, England last year. This is Canada Day London. That's Trafalgar Square, and that's Alan Doyle singing too. Tens of thousands of Canadians that came through. That was a lot of fun. Anyway, so okay, I'll final mention here. You've gone through all that. You've got a yes. What's the next step? Obviously, send the completed contract. Make sure it's detailed. Have a lawyer write it up. Send the invoice, all that stuff goes without saying. Work with them to create an activation plan that is done well in advance of the actual event itself or the opening of the season or when the sponsorship begins or whatever it is. All that stuff should be done. There should be a document behind it so you can track it back. And the final thing I just want to leave you with on that note, your renewal process to re-sign these partners for 1, 2, 3 years down the line, the renewal process begins the second that contract is signed. Especially on a 1-year deal, you've got them in the door, you've got a first date. Now you got to instantly work on over-delivering them, showing them a love, making them feel really good about this decision they made, because that will lead to a renewal very quickly. Brands love working with organizations that are easy to work with. And if you can show them that, you're going to get those renewals right away. And then you can start getting into long-term deals. It's a very commonly known business stat, but I'll say it again. It's 10 times more expensive to find a new customer than to renew an existing one. So once you have them in the door, you don't want to let them read. So you need to be thinking about renewals as soon as that first contract is done. So in short, if this sounds like a lot of work, I mean, it is. This isn't something that can necessarily be done properly just whenever you get around to it. Now, I understand most people on this call don't necessarily have the budgets to hire, a full-time veteran partnership type person, which is fine. There's agencies you can outsource to. Mine's one of them, but there's other ones out there as well. But if you're going to do this internally, really set aside time every week to do it. Even if you've only got 2 to 3 hours a week, just in your calendars, it's like between 1 and 3 every Wednesday, I focus on corporate partnerships and really set aside that time to make this all happen. Because I can tell you, if you don't, it's just going to be a thing you get to when you get to, which means you never really get to it, or you start the process, but then you get busy, and so it falls off, and you forget to write the brand back or whatever it is. Like really ensure that you have the time set aside and be very diligent about it, and just be like, this is my sponsorship procurement time. So again, take the time to do it properly. Think long term. Look at growing these partnerships over several long years. And over time, I promise you, you do things the right way, you will build a long lasting portfolio of corporate partners that are going to be with you for the long term. That brings me to the end of this conversation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and slide this back. And I'll start to open this up for questions. I see some in the chat. I've been staring at this presentation the whole time, so I haven't had a chance to review, but let's see what we got here. Okay, this is a lot of reading. I did see, can you talk about the use of the word sponsorship versus partnership? What sponsors? That's a great question. It's one I get a lot. In the longer version of this presentation, I go through that. There's no set definition. The way I like to think about it is a sponsor is somebody that's doing a 1-year contract with you that's very basic. It's, we're going to put a logo up and set up an activation booth at your event for a couple of days. That's somebody who's just sponsoring, and they're looking to leverage what you're already doing, but they're not really investing in you beyond like paying a cash fee to be a part of it. A partner is somebody who's with you for the long term, or it's somebody who has they have pouring rights as an example. So if you do a partnership with Coca-Cola for an event, they're vested because the more Coke you sell, the more money they make. So you both have an equitable stake in the success of this. Partners are preferred too, because if they have that stake, they're probably going to go above and beyond to make your event as great as possible and to drive traffic to your event, because they'll see more sales as a result of it. So again, there's not like a set definition, but I do always think of partners as your long-term vested interest partners who are going to want your event to be as successful as possible, as opposed to a sponsor who's maybe just throwing a logo on something and hoping for the best. I had a question that came in earlier on what are the symptoms of an event that does not attract sponsors, which is another good question. I would say almost any event that has 30, 40, 50 people involved in it probably can attract a sponsor. Maybe it won't be huge money, but you probably can get sponsorship for it. The ones that don't are the ones that are very amateur or just not run properly. And brands can tell that. 1-year proposal will dictate that right away, like I was talking to. But if they think they're going to come up and things are going to be scattered and the guest experience isn't going to be great because it's just kind of volunteers that are just showing up with some, I don't know, Costco snacks or things like that and hoping for the best, they're not going to want to sponsor that. It's not a good look for their brand. And it also indicates to them that they're going to have to do a lot of the work to get any realization of profit or return on the sponsor investment. So they typically just shy away from those and would go to something that they know is going to be more turnkey. So again, like I've done sponsorships for an event that had like 40 people in it before. I mean, it was like 40 decision makers, and so it was a very influential room, but I don't think it's necessarily a crowd size or even the property size so much as it's just, is this being run professionally, properly? Did the brand feel good about trusting you with their brand? That's the impressions that you're going to get, and really where it becomes a yes or no situation. There's another question that came in. What are the top no or no's or the common mistakes one makes when trying to secure a sponsorship? Yeah, another great question. I talked about this a bit before. I would say focusing on you and not them, or focusing on, we'll put your logo up, or giving them generic gold, silver, bronze packages that they know you've sent to everybody in your Rolodex. You're going to get no's. You're not even going to get a no. They're just not going to call you back. Or if you pestered them, eventually maybe you'll get a no from them. But if you go in that way, they're just, they're not going to feel good about this. You're just not going to get the response. So yeah, I would say that's focusing again on what you do and not what you can do for them. It's a common mistake. I've done it, especially starting out. I see my clients do it a lot. But that's a recipe to get a no, because frankly, they don't really care what you do for you and for other people. They care what you can do for them. Can you elaborate on elements or roles of a good hosting opportunity? Oh, I like that question. Um, don't Even if you don't have a lot of money to invest in a good corporate hosting opportunity, doing whatever you can to make this feel like it's different from just like attending the event in general. Um, so whether it's better lighting or an intimate space or this carpet or just something that it feels a little bit different so they feel like they're a bit special when they're out there. The other thing, if you have this at your disposal, is experiences that money can't buy. So like when I used to work for the Canadian Finals Rodeo and would do sponsors, would take sponsors on like behind the shoots tour, would take them down into like the bowels of what was then Rexall Place, show them how everything works behind the scenes, introduce them to the athletes, give them that experience. It didn't cost us anything, right? It took me 45 minutes. I walked them through. I shook some hands. It was a very low investment, but they feel really cool about it because they know that nobody else gets to go on this. So it's creating those experiences for them, a meet and greet with like an artist or whatever it is. I mean, I don't, there's like 40 organizations on this call. So, I mean, I can't go through them all in the fine tooth comb, but it's creating unique experiences that make them feel different than a regular guest that's coming out there. The final point on that, like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to cost you a lot of money. You just kind of got to get creative with what you have to offer, and then deliver that for the sponsor. Okay. I think
Adam,
that's,
there is
yeah.
one question that I think is important. Let me go back to it. Yeah, it's from Sonia. With an online application systems that a lot of companies have in place, how can you make sure that your message gets across in the boxes that they provide?
Yeah. So that's, oh, yeah, I see that one now. So I have a few thoughts on these online portals. In my time, I don't recall ever securing a sponsorship just because I filled out an application. Honestly, I stopped doing it very early in my career because you get nowhere. Like I had said, TELUS as an example. I mean, TELUS is a big company, but there's other big companies too. They receive thousands of these things. The way that I mean, I know a lot of them do it is once a quarter they'll all sit down, they'll go through 400 of these applications in an afternoon. Really, what they're looking for in there is a keyword or at least showing that you understand business jargon. That's one of the reasons why I started this presentation by talking about sponsorship definitions. So at least you can speak the language and you sort of you convey that you understand what it is they're looking to do. All of that being said, the only time I've ever filled out those applications now is when I've already met with the person and I know the deal is done and they said, "Hey Adam, can you just fill this out because these are the channels we're supposed to follow. We'll approve it. Just fill out the application so we have a record of it." Honestly, those portals aren't a good use of your time. If you're going to spend an afternoon just filling them out, the odds of success are very, very, very low. You're much better to actually go out in person, figure out what they're looking to do, and then maybe apply afterwards. But just applying cold, honestly, I can't remember it ever actually working. I think it's a way that companies just kind of tell you to just go over there. I don't want to talk to you, kind of thing. So if you get buzzed off like that, I mean, apply for it if you really want. But if the person just instantly goes, "Oh, just fill out this online application form," it's 99% a no, and it's probably not worth your time.
Okay. And a question about production costs. Is this something that should be included in the budget that you present, or how do you deal with
Yeah,
that, especially in
yeah, I love these
smaller
questions actually
communities?
because they're quite detailed. Not how do I make the brand bigger or something like that. The way I always recommend doing it is handling all the printing and signage and any of the activations yourself internally. So what you would do is, you charge a $10,000 for a sponsorship fee. You have to know that 500 or 1,000 or whatever it is out of that is going to be allocated towards printing and signage and just fulfilling the deal. But do all the fulfillment yourself. One, if you're going to say, I'll use printing and signage as an example, you're probably going to, if you're using a printer for all of your signs, you're probably going to get a discount as opposed to what the sponsor would pay just getting like one sign produced. But two, you also have control over the look and feel of them all because if the sponsor is doing it themselves, they're not all going to be the same size and the same look. And suddenly your venue or your event or whatever it is going to start to feel very disjointed, very amateurish because you've got like these different shapes and sizes and different, some are vinyl, some are cardboard, some are, portaplast or like whatever. But you just don't have that consistent feel. So it really takes away from, one, the guest experience when they come to your facility, and two, what the sponsorship looks like. There's if you're ever in Edmonton here and you go to Clare Drake Arena, which I actually do work with and finding them some sponsors. So this was like that before I got there. But it's very disjointed. Like I love Clare Drake. It's an old historical arena, but there's all these different shapes and sizes signs all over the place. And I just think it looks really amateurish. So charge them a fee for doing that and include the signage costs in the sponsorship fee. But whenever possible, handle it yourself. Just collect the logo, collect the ad, and you do all the printing. For the reasons I just outlined.
Okay. Adam, could you talk about the workshop that we are working on?
Absolutely. So, I mean, if you enjoyed this, I do a much longer version where I'll go through inventory, through valuation. We'll create a prospect list. We'll create a customized proposal template that you can just use, to plug and play for the rest of your own procurements. We're going to be running that. I'll be coming down to Calgary. We'll be there on February 21st from 9 to about 12:30. It normally takes about 3 to 4 hours, depending on questions and how it all goes. But I find if I go over 4 hours, it's a lot of information that people take in, and people start to get kind of tired. So that's about the time frame behind it. For the one at Sport Calgary here, we only have room for about 4 organizations, up to 20 people total. I'll say that includes every organization that's a part of it. We'll get 3 coaching calls from me afterwards. So we'll finish the workshop, and then 2 to 4 weeks later, we'll have a call. 2 to 4 weeks after that, we'll have another one. So I can kind of help you with any questions you have on your negotiations. I can review your inventory and make sure it's valued properly. I can make sure your proposals are looking good. Really work with you to make sure you're putting your best foot forward out there. Like I said, that'll be going February 21st. Really excited to come down to Calgary and talk to some people about it. There is limited availability. But I do run these things, year round. About once a month, I do one. So, I mean, if you can't make it to that one, but you're interested in having me come out, just, connect with me. I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can find me on there, just Adam Watt, or send me an email, awatt@eventpartnerships.com.
Thank you very much, Adam. So for everybody, thank you very much for attending. I hope this workshop was interesting for you. We will follow up with you with the recording of this webinar. Second, with a form that we will ask parties that are interested in participating in the workshop to express your interest, and there will be a few questions for you to fill in. The space is limited. As Adam explained, it will work with 4 organizations only. Depending on the demand, depending on those expression of interest, we may call Adam back to run additional workshop down the road throughout the year. So if your organization is not selected for that workshop, don't despair. We will try to bring Adam back to work with you on sponsorship package. Adam, I want to thank you very much. I'll follow up with you later on. And for everybody, again, have a good day, and thank you for participating.
Thanks for having me. It's really great.